Good day. I'm Kimberly Penn, Chief Strategist for Women in Drones. I'm looking forward to having a great discussion with our guest, Dr. Anita Sengupta. And we're going to learn some things about pushing innovation and how she has arrived to this very seat today. And so with that being said, again, welcome. We're very excited to have you, and I'm looking forward to our audience learning more about the journey that you've taken to get here and what some of the potential in terms of innovation is as we move forward. So if you could please tell us more about yourself, how did you get into this seat today? And would love to hear more about that.
Well, it's been a journey. So my background is all aerospace engineering. All my degrees are in aerospace engineering, BS, MS, PhD. And I always wanted to be a pilot. I always wanted to be an engineer. I always wanted to work on the space program. So I spent the bulk of my career working for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, about 16 years. And then I love space exploration. I still do, but I really wanted to do something which was more impactful to society. So I decided to leave and join the green transportation space in the private sector. And been a few years working for the Hyperloop, which ironically has a test track right here outside of Las Vegas, which I worked on a little bit for a couple of years, and then decided to do my own entrepreneurial venture working to decarbonize aviation. And then I met Sharon via a colleague, and we did, I think, a diversity panel together. We met again at a different event, mobility focused. So that basically is how I'm here today.
Very good, very good. So as you shared, you are a rocket scientist, a commercial pilot, an aerospace engineer, a PhD in terms of your doctorate, and you've had a big footprint in all of the industries mentioned. When we look at aerospace, for example, what do you think the future of aerospace is as we continue to explore the moon, our return? What would you say would be some of the innovation that we should be looking forward to?
Yeah, so I think aerospace is kind of like the big sector that's coming. Like I think there was the .com era, there was the communications era, handheld device era, and I think now we're definitely in the aerospace era. And I think it has two different sections. One is the aviation section, which is focused on basically decarbonization technologies to make aviation more sustainable. And then we have the space sector, and the space sector is kind of a completely open opportunity, right? Because you could have space tourism, as there is a feature here over at CS on that. You can have more better telecommunications. You can have mining for natural resources. Lots of companies are actually looking at potentially doing manufacturing in space as a means of both reducing their carbon footprint here on Earth, as well as doing it more cost effectively. And ultimately, what I see happening is the expansion of human beings into space. So, the first colonies on the moon, the first colonies on Mars. I'm definitely more a Mars first than a moon first sort of person. So it's almost the sky is not the limit in the terms of the technologies that have to be developed for the space exploration sector, as well as the decarbonization of the aviation sector.
Excellent. I like that. The sky is not the limit. Very good. And when we look at Mars, for example, we know that we've had like the Perseverance, the rover, and you've done some work as it relates to like the Hyperloop. Can you tell us more about that particular part and how that connects with some of the space exploration and so forth?
Yeah, so one of my big roles when I was at NASA was developing the landing system for the Curiosity rover. So the Curiosity rover came first, well, several rovers, but I worked on Curiosity and the Perseverance came afterwards. And so one of the challenges associated with that from an engineering perspective is to safely land it on the surface. And that's kind of an extreme environment because you're coming in at really fast speeds, you're experiencing high heat loads, high G loads, air thermodynamic loads, which require a heat shield. And so a lot of those technologies are kind of unique to Earth entry systems, like re-entry systems or entry systems to land on the surface of Mars. There may not be a lot of overlaps between those technologies and we might use here in terrestrial applications, but the practices that you take from an engineering perspective to optimize the design to be mass efficient, to be energy efficient, actually generates new technologies. And those technologies, although they're used initially for the space program, can and oftentimes do make their way into the private sector. And so when you translate that to the Hyperloop, which is actually a terrestrial ground-based transportation system, it is kind of like a spacecraft traveling on the ground because it's using electric propulsion. It's operating in a vacuum tube, which is similar to space. And then a lot of the energy storage technologies, a lot of the battery technologies, fuel cell technology, structural technologies like composite materials, all of that originally did come from the space program. So it is making its way into terrestrial applications pretty nicely.
Absolutely. There's a number of space-related startups that have launched across the globe, particularly on this side of the coast, for example, because of space like in Nevada, where you can do a lot of testing. If you could launch another startup outside of all the amazing work that you've done and CEO even now of your own organization, what might you pursue and what might we encourage our audience to consider as they're looking at opportunities to either grow or launch?
Well, so I'm definitely very much focused on my current startup, which is a hydrogen fuel cell technology, and focused on it from a, an aviation perspective and even a ground vehicle transportation perspective. But I do see us adding additional business units to the company to support maritime as well as to support space exploration. So one of the unique aspects of the aviation use case is that it has to be incredibly reliable. It has to be very durable. It has to operate at close to peak power for extended periods of time. That's quite different from a car, for example, or for a truck, for example. So there's a lot of overlaps in the technologies that we're developing for our fuel cell stack for aviation that can be used for the space program. And so one of our activities that we have that we're doing under a contract with the Air Force actually is making the membranes inside of the fuel cell stack more durable, and that has a direct application to future human exploration activities where you want to have a hydrogen fuel cell as your energy storage means, like whether it's on the moon or on Mars or something like that. But I think I do love the space program, so probably I definitely would want to expand the business unit there. And then, there are planetary bodies that do have atmospheres, like, for example, Mars does have an atmosphere, so you can actually have aircraft. They shouldn't be called aircraft because it's not air on Mars, it's CO2. But you can have vehicles that use aerodynamic lift that could utilize, for example, hydrogen fuel cell technology. So you could have Mars airplanes and things like that. So I can imagine that as being not a spin-off, but another division of the current company. But yeah, I think now's a great time to be an entrepreneur because there's so many new technologies that have to be developed.
Sure.
They usually have to be developed at a much smaller scale, which is a good fit for a startup, and then get scaled up with private capital, government funding, things like that.
Absolutely, yes. When we think about SIVers and tech transfers and commercialization, this is, I definitely think, a great time for startups in that particular space.
Definitely.
Very good. If you had the opportunity to talk to a class full of, or auditorium, in this case, of 10th graders, girls and boys, they're interested in STEM only in that they have some courses that they're required, what might you encourage them to consider as they enter into their end of high school years and thinking about their next steps for college or apprenticeships and things like that? What might you consider saying?
Well, definitely, I say this to people all the time, like, little kids, medium-sized kids, teenagers, and even adults who are looking for a second career. The place to get a job nowadays is definitely the STEM fields, whether it's on the computer side of things with, coding, being a code developer, or being an electrical engineer, a mechanical engineer, aerospace engineer, chemical engineer. That's where all the jobs are. And those jobs are actually really good paying jobs. They will last for a long time. Like, you're not going to get replaced anytime soon. If you have that kind of background, you'll be in demand. And in terms of what you would need to do in your, sort of like middle to high school realm would be to take as many math and science classes as you can. So definitely chemistry, definitely physics if you could take it, AP chemistry, AP physics, definitely pre-calculus if you could take it, calculus, definitely linear algebra, trying to think what else you take in high school. Probably just it's been too long since I spoke to high school students, but I am a professor as well at USC, and so having mathematical abilities is super important in the STEM field, like whether you're doing the computer side or you're doing more hands-on electrical mechanical side of things. And then another thing which is really important is basically communication skills, because when you do work in any type of organization, you have to work as a team. So you have to be able to communicate with each other, communicate with your management, communicate with your customers, and then you also have to be a team player. So problem solving in a team environment is, you could do that in high school organizations like robotics clubs, if you're building like an airplane, that type of thing. Any of those sort of teaming projects will look great on your resume for applying to college. It will help you to basically be a better STEM engineer or scientist. And I'm very much always focused on the engineering side, but certainly there's a ton of careers on the pure science side, whether that's physics, chemistry, biology.
Sure.
And even the space program utilizes all the different science disciplines as well as all the different engineering disciplines, if that's what you wanted to work on, the space program related stuff.
Very good. Engineering is, as you said, is definitely a long-standing in demand. It's often the highest paid major, even when people graduate from a university, for example. And we see engineers really pushing innovation as they're working and partnering with the different disciplinary fields as well. Very good. Okay. One of my last questions for you would be, what would you go back and tell 25-year-old? I know that you're just a few years older than that now, but what would you tell 25-year-old Anita Sengupta about where you are today and the excitement, the tools, anything that you could give us some feedback?
Well, so I actually do think about that a lot of time in the way that I communicate to young people now, which is ways to be successful, ways to be more successful more quickly, and probably have more confidence in yourself. Try really difficult and challenging things, and speak up for yourself. So I think up until I started to do public speaking, I was actually a very shy, very quiet person, and I would never ask for help. So always ask for help, right? So no sense in getting stuck. Go and ask for help from your professors, your mentors. Other thing I would tell my younger self: get a mentor as soon as you can, and that really does help. And you don't just have to have one mentor; you can have 5 mentors. At one point, I actually had 5 mentors when I was doing my first project manager job at JPL. But I think what I always tell young people is you've got to find something that you feel passionate about. You have to find something that you just feel like I'm making a difference, and that might morph over time, and it did for me, right? So I really wanted to do space program stuff, and I realized, you know what? It's not as fulfilling as I thought it was going to be for the long term. That's why I wanted to shift into the green transportation space. So try and find ways that you feel like you can make a difference to society. And I'm actually seeing a shift now, even with my own students and young people that I talk to, which is that, people are less interested in doing things just because they're cool. And they're actually like, how can I do something to help, solve climate change? So I think find a way that you can really take your skills and your passions to help other people, to help society, to help the planet. And that is where you're going to be successful. That is where you're going to be happy. And that's the way you're going to be able to just be even more creative because you know that you're doing something which is useful.
Excellent. Beautiful answer. I love that. Mentorship is always incredibly important. It's not an age sensitive piece. I think you should have a mentor as long as you're alive in some form or fashion, and a number of mentors. Often with women in drones, we have lots of requests for folks looking for mentors and sometimes even coaching, although those two roles are very different in terms of how you grow professionally and personally. Very good. Well, we have really appreciated and valued your time. A call of action that we would have, particularly with women in drones, would be to enter into those tough classes, especially our younger students and such. Math and sciences can be challenging, and to make a point to look for what your passion is so that you can be part of the pipeline, helping shape and create the innovative part of STEM, whether it's the space, the engineering, and all the other pieces, because again, you're just an amazing example of someone I think who have really utilized all the resources that you've gotten access to. Again, commercial pilot, rocket scientist, aerospace engineer, CEO, entrepreneur, and I think that that's just amazing work. So thank you for sharing part of your journey with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Very good. Okay, thank you.